As somebody said during hedgerow week, what's the best kind of hedge to have? It's the one you already have. No matter how poor it is, it's better than a new hedge because it's got history. It's got 200 years of undisturbed soil beneath it, full of biodiversity, full of carbon, possibly plants that are there. It's not all about the hedge plants. So the existing hedges are good, but we can always improve them.
As fields are harvested and farmers are clearing straw, the next tasks in the fields are becoming apparent. Trimming hedges to ensure safe passage for machinery and to minimise crop competition is routine on most tillage farms. Driving the country, tillage field hedgerows look more like square blocks than something nature had shaped. Overmanagement of these hedgerows is an issue, with biodiversity the clear loser. You are listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Tillage farms are often identified as areas with low biodiversity due to the low amount of habitat or how these habitats are managed. Hedgerows are a valuable habitat which can be managed differently to enhance this biodiversity without compromising field production. With this in mind, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Keena, Countryside Management Specialist in Teagasc, to chat about hedgerows and how we can actually manage them better. Catherine, tillage farmers are well known for keeping very neat hedges. Are they too neat and tidy?
Possibly a little bit, Michael. I mean, every inch up and wide is a bonus for biodiversity and for climate. So the bigger the better. It doesn't mean they all have to be big, but it would be fantastic if there could be some left up. As I said, the bigger and better. The advantage of some of them is they can be dense at the base, maybe. And so just to let them out and up a little bit, and also to leave a tree in them.
Okay, and from the point of view of research, because I know there's a little bit of research done around on tillage farms, how was that in terms of that research? How were the hedges on, or maybe hedges and margins, how were they rated in terms of quantity and quality, of which are both two very different factors on tillage farms?
Yeah, I mean the quantity, as we know from the BIS and the eco schemes, they are there. Now obviously we'd always like more, but I think it's the quality, it's the height, and the variety maybe isn't quite as much there. So we would like, as I said, more. We kind of divide our hedges into two types: tree line hedges, which are totally, free growing into a line. It is still a hedge, but where it's never topped, and then they may be less frequent, are less frequent on tillage farms.
Okay, and the quality part of that. So what we're talking about there is the density of the different species, or is it this? Is it that and the size of it?
Yes, the size. No, a species of existing, like we have nearly 700,000 kilometres of hedges in the country, and they are fantastic. As somebody said during hedgerow week, what's the best kind of hedge to have? It's the one you already have. No matter how poor it is, it's better than a new hedge because it's got history. It's got 200 years of undisturbed soil beneath it, full of biodiversity, full of carbon, possibly plants that are there. It's not all about the hedge plants. So the existing hedges are good, but we can always improve them. And then, therefore, we don't improve them we can't change the species in what we have. So that may be relevant for new hedges, but for our old hedges, it's all about the size. And for the old hedges, it's just about taking a little bit easier on them, cutting and leaving occasional thorn trees grow up in the topped hedges, which is a new idea.
Yeah, and if we're talking about that hedge, which probably, I suppose, maybe more traditionally out there, you might say it'd be, I don't know, to be a metre high or maybe a little bit width and scarcely a metre wide, for something that you would consider relatively ideal for, in terms of increasing the quality and having a much better type hedge there. How big, wide, and you already mentioned the letting a few stalks up there to mature trees into it. But
Yes.
what's the size and width that we're talking about?
The bigger the better, the taller the better, but the tallness of that topped hedge that has already got a dense space, the tallness of that will depend on how high your hedge cutter flail will go, because we do want, if it's a topped hedge, we want to keep it as keep it from escaping. Because I suppose the most important thing with anything to do with hedges is to understand that if you plant a new whitethorn whip, all it wants to do is grow into a single tree with a single stem and a big canopy. So we're constantly fighting that to keep it in a hedge. And if once we understand that, anything is good. But to go back to your den space, then we want to keep it cut. So ideally at least 1.5 meters, because we know no birds nest in vegetation that's less than that, because they get attacked from above and below by predators of all sorts. But you'd like to see a variety of 1.5, maybe up to 3 meters high, that where the hedge cutter flail can still cut the top to stop it turning into trees, except for the occasional tree, as you mentioned.
Okay, so is it as simple then? So say, again, going back to that particular square type of well manicured or well cut hedge, as the farmer might describe it, and they're trying to, I suppose, develop it into what you were talking about, meter wide or 3 meters tall or whatever, the kind of the bigger nice hedge like that. Does the farmer just walk away from that for 3 years, and as soon as it's big enough, start flailing it then, or is it a gradual process of bringing it up over time?
It's incremental. I suppose the first point is just to make sure that the hedge you're talking about is dense at the base, that it's not one of our mushroom or upside down tallage brush hedges, which needs to start again at the base. But assuming, I think what we're talking about now is more or less a block of a hedge, only a small block. So to get that to a big block, it should be incremental. Wherever you cut the hedge, it'll multiply. So rather than if you let it all go in one, you'll have strings of 18 inches every year. So rather than cut the top of the 18 inches, you cut every year a little bit higher, a little bit wider. So incremental cutting is really the way to get from a small box to a larger box, and kind of, again, get an A shape to it where it's relevant. And that's where there's already kind of growth at the base. The other ones then, which I'm not so sure are as common on tillage farmers, is, as I said, the upside down tallage brush hedges where there's a stump and a fringe. Now they need to be brought back to the ground before you start off on your journey of up to your 2-3 meters high.
So that's like a kind of a circular saw type scenario. Zip it all down right at the very ground.
Yes, for the ones that have the upside down tallage brush hedge, where there's a stump at the base, the stump is not able to support a hedge long term, and that's how we kill a hedge, by keeping flailing it without having a base underneath it. So that's your upside down tallage brush hedge. Yes, flail it, circular saw it at the base, as close as possible to the ground, depending on stones and wire and that. And then you'll see that if you cut back that stump, you'll get like maybe 50 sprouts, and then you bring that up incrementally, up and out. And that would be, so that's ideal, where you have, as I said, upside down tallage brush, and where you have enough of them that it'll still make a good hedge. I know you mightn't be as worried about stock proof, I suppose, in your world, but yeah.
But that's exactly what I was going to ask you there, in terms of that type of hedge that you have to start again. In a scenario where there's plenty of those to cut out of it, they'll make a perfect hedge again. But what if they're a little bit incremental along the length of the hedge? Is intersowing possible at that stage?
There's gaps. It's possible. It's always way, way, way more difficult than with a new hedge. When we plant a new hedge, you'll have no failures if you follow best practice. Into an existing hedge is difficult. It's more likely to succeed when you are cutting back to the base, because at least the light now is getting in. That's the only time I would even try. I would never try to put trees into an existing hedge, because it's a nightmare to get them growing. But in your case, where you are missing a few. Now, in a tillage situation, if you're not worried about stock proofness, we have to keep remembering why we're cutting. If stock proofness isn't the name of the game, gaps don't matter too much.
The other question to ask is around the new rules around GAC or GAC rules, which are kind of linked across compliance. All tillage farmers have to have a minimum of 4% of their area, which includes the hedgerows. And as part of that, there's conditions around that in terms of maintenance and cutting of those hedgerows. Are they fairly compatible with what we've been talking about so far?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And the new rule there to the landscape features is with regard to removal. I think a lot of people haven't spotted it. If you remove 100 meters of hedge now, the amount you have to plant instead is doubled. So you now have to plant 200 if you remove 100, and that's the BIS and the your single farm payment criteria. You also have to remember you do that without looking for permission. If you're removing more than 500 meters or creating a field which is more than 5 hectares, which is more likely to happen before the 500 meter, you must look for permission, and that's the EIA. So there's three things to remember if anybody's thinking of taking out a hedge. One is the doubling the amount you have to replant on your farm before you take it out. Secondly, check whether you need to get permission from an EIA. So that they're important things just to know if you're. And sorry, the third thing was if you're planting hedges under acres, that does not count as a replacement hedge because obviously you're being paid separately for that.
Okay. I'm looking out the window and I'm actually baking here inside in the office. It's just a fabulous day outside. We're having this lovely Indian summer type of scenario going on here. Just in terms of birds, and I know people can now go and trim their hedges from September the 1st. Is there any danger in this kind of weather that birds are going to continue to be feeding young? And is there a danger that people will be upsetting them and maybe we should be delaying it a little bit further in the dates in it?
I don't think for the nesting, Michael, but I suppose it's the fruit we're removing when we're cutting hedges now. So in the ideal world, you would cut your hedges that have fruit in February. Now, as we know, 80-90% of hedges are cut by contractors, so that's not practical. And also, I suppose the vision I would have for an intensively managed farm is that they would have a good proportion, we haven't said what, but a proportion of hedges that are tree line hedges, which in other words have canopies full of fruit and flowers, and that our topped hedges will contain the occasional thorn trees, which again will be full of fruit and flowers. So therefore the body of the hedge, which is what we're trimming at this time of year, if it's been trimmed lightly every year, there's going to be no fruit and flowers on that anyway.
And just mentioning the contractors, is there, a farmer probably has to try and educate their contractor in terms of the new way that hedges should be cut or lightly trimmed. Yeah. Is there a best way of going about that we could give tips to some listeners on?
Communication. Francis Quigley, our machinery specialist, now has been saying at all our events, talk to the contractor. They can't be, they don't know what you want. And in general, all the contractors that we speak to, you're paying them. They will do anything you want, but they can't read your mind. So, even we've had examples this week where I mightn't have said exactly what I wanted and, we didn't get it. So, but we had fabulous examples. We were getting them all just to leave the new shrub in the hedge to grow up, because farmers and advisors say to me, I don't have a thorn tree to leave. Every hedge has a thorn tree to leave, but it's only a little whip is what the contractor was leaving during this week in our demonstrations. And you need to see it. So the contractors need to see and understand, but it's all about communication. They can't know. And by next year, they need to be reminded again where that whip is, because the hedge will have almost grown up around it in the first year. So it needs to be marked. So it's all about communication, Michael. They will do, or they should do, and I've never met a contractor who won't do what you're paying them to do.
Is there any particular resources, a good video that we could recommend to farmers that they could just show on their mobile phone to the contractor to say, this is what I'm after?
Yes, we have a video on leaving a new thorn in a topped hedge from a previous year. So they are all there on our website, particularly for derogation farmers. Again, that may not be tillage, because derogation farmers must manage their hedges either, cutting every 3-year cycle or leaving a thorn tree. So they were the ones we were targeting, particularly with that video. So yeah, maybe we need to do more again, Michael. We were concentrating this year actually on the planting, because there's about 5,000 farmers going to plant 2,000 kilometres of hedges this winter under acres, and I'm sure some of them are tillage farmers. So that was our big focus at the minute, is getting farmers to decide which type of hedge to plant, whether they're planting the topped hedge and the tree line hedge. and manage accordingly. Too many people plant a hedge, don't manage it at the base to create that dense space, and then when it comes to the top of the wire, it's a single stem and they top it and it turns into your upside down Tillage brush hedge, which is an absolute shame for a new hedge to go the wrong way.
And in terms of good advice around that, is it a case where when you're planting that hedge, do you need to put some like a weed barrier down underneath those, or can farmers get away with that? Can we get away with not doing that?
Well, again, the question back to you is, which hedge are you talking about? Totally different. If it's a topped hedge, yes. If it's a tree line hedge, you do nothing and you let it up naturally, let it, escape into a tree line hedge, and then provided it's never topped. And not everybody needs a stock-proof hedge. So we have 2 videos out today on how to plant a tree line hedge and how to plant a topped hedge. And I don't mind. I want both, as I say. So the topped hedge will absolutely have to have a barrier. The simplest is the compostable film. Where you can use bark mulch. We're trying sheep's wool. The sheep farmers were interested in trying that out. Anything that blocks the light will work, but the one that works for everybody is the compostable film when you're cutting it down, and then you have the dense space, because instead of one stem then growing up into a single tree, you've multiplied it by 5. We'll come back next year, cut those back down again to wherever we want them to bush, which will be a couple of inches above the previous cut. Then we'll have 25, and the third year we'll have, do your maths, 5 by 125, and that's what we want for the topped hedge, a really, really dense space. And that I would only ever prune at ground level if you're putting down the compostable film.
So, Catherine, is there anywhere that people can actually find those videos that we were talking about a few minutes ago?
Yeah, just Google Teagasc farmland habitats, and you will come to those videos. And the last chance for anybody in Cork tomorrow, the last Hedgerow Week event where we're talking about these new hedges, is in Teagasc in Curtains Farm at 11 o'clock. So all are welcome.
Catherine, thanks very much for your time. I know you have a very busy week. You have a huge amount of events on. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll be talking to you again.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, Michael.
So that's it for this week, and my thanks to Catherine for joining me on the show. Just remember, tomorrow, Friday, September the 8th, we have the Crops Forum in the Kilashee Hotel in Naas. We'll cover a number of topics, including new varieties, agronomy for the autumn, the new macro climate change model for tillage, and also, most importantly, a discussion forum with stakeholders around the future of the industry. Everyone is welcome to this, and it's a perfect opportunity to get your say on how the tillage industry should be shaped. Another date for your diary is a farm walk we've organised on Don Summers' farm, not too far away from Enniscorthy, on Thursday, September the 14th at 10:30 a.m. Don is participating in the Signpost Farm programme and is carrying out some very interesting and effective methods to improve nutrient efficiency on his soils, as well as improving water quality and also the use of precision technology. Please come along, it's free to everyone to attend. So finally, don't forget, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague, and as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.